The person you trust most might be the one destroying you most systematically, and the traits you think prove their goodness? Those might be the very weapons they're using against you. What if everything you've been taught to recognize as a green flag is actually a red flag in disguise? You've learned to spot the obvious toxic behaviors, the interrupting, the boundary violations, the immediate red flags that make your skin crawl. But the most dangerous manipulators don't rely on obvious tactics. They've evolved. They use your own values against you, turning kindness into weakness, trust into vulnerability, and love into control. Research suggests that the most successful manipulators don't look toxic at all. They look like everything you've been searching for. Dr. Martha Stout's work at Harvard reveals that psychopaths and manipulators specifically study what healthy people want to see, then perform those exact behaviors to bypass psychological defenses. Studies indicate that when someone appears to display positive traits early in a relationship, our critical thinking actually decreases by up to 40%. We stop looking for problems because we think we've found the solution. Psychologists have observed that this creates what they call false positive safety. Your guard drops precisely when it should be highest, because the most sophisticated predators don't break down your walls, they get you to open the gate yourself. Here are 12 green flags that are actually red flags in disguise. The first green flag that's actually a red flag is excessive early generosity. They shower you with gifts, favors, and grand gestures within days or weeks of meeting you. It feels like you found someone incredibly giving, someone who values you immediately. But this isn't generosity, it's investment. Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that love bombing often disguises itself as exceptional kindness. The manipulator creates artificial debt through overwhelming generosity, making you feel obligated to reciprocate with loyalty, access, or compliance. Research shows that when someone receives unexpected gifts or favors early in a relationship, they experience a psychological pressure to balance the scales, even when the generosity wasn't requested. Notice how their generosity feels slightly overwhelming, how it comes with subtle expectations, how saying no to their gifts makes you feel guilty. That discomfort isn't ingratitude. It's your instinct recognizing that this kindness has strings attached. Real generosity doesn't create debt. Manipulative generosity always does. The second green flag that's actually a red flag is perfect listening skills. They remember everything you say, ask thoughtful follow-up questions, and seem genuinely fascinated by your thoughts and experiences. It feels like you've finally found someone who truly sees you, but they're not listening to connect, they're listening to collect. Studies in forensic psychology show that manipulative individuals demonstrate exceptional memory for personal details not out of care, but as information gathering. Every story you tell, every fear you share, every dream you mention becomes data in their psychological profile of you. They're building a blueprint of your vulnerabilities, your triggers, your desires. Notice how their questions feel slightly probing, how they remember details that even close friends forget, how they bring up things you mentioned weeks ago at strategically convenient moments. That's not exceptional memory, it's reconnaissance. They're not falling in love with who you are, they're studying who you are so they can become who you need. The third green flag that's actually a red flag is instant deep connection. Within hours or days, you're sharing things you've never told anyone, feeling understood in ways you've never experienced, convinced you found your soulmate or best friend. It feels like destiny, but it's actually strategy. Behavioral research shows that manipulators use a technique called artificial intimacy acceleration. They share carefully chosen vulnerabilities to trigger reciprocal disclosure, creating a false sense of mutual trust and understanding. Dr. George Simon notes that this premature intimacy bypasses the natural vetting process that protects us from harmful people. Notice how the connection feels almost too good to be true, how quickly you're sharing secrets, how they seem to understand you better than people who've known you for years. That's not rare compatibility, it's calculated mirroring. They're not connecting with your authentic self. They're reflecting back what you most want to see. The fourth green flag that's actually a red flag is protective jealousy. They express concern about people in your life who might hurt you, want to shield you from situations that could be harmful, and seem genuinely worried about your well-being. It feels like someone finally cares enough to protect you, but protection and control often wear the same mask. Research on coercive control shows that isolation frequently begins with expressions of care and concern. The manipulator positions themselves as your protector while systematically undermining your other relationships and support systems. Studies indicate that this protective behavior often escalates gradually, starting with reasonable concerns and evolving into complete social isolation. Notice how their protection feels slightly possessive, how their concerns about others seem to increase over time, how their worry about your safety begins to limit your freedom. That's not love. That's ownership. Real protection empowers you to make your own choices. Manipulative protection makes those choices for you. Here's where it gets dangerous. The next four green flags don't just feel good, they feel like evidence of emotional maturity and relationship skills. The fifth green flag that's actually a red flag is helpful suggestions. They offer advice, solutions, and improvements for your life with genuine concern and apparent wisdom. It feels like you found a mentor, someone who wants to help you grow and succeed, but they're not trying to improve your life. They're trying to control it. Clinical psychology research shows that unsolicited advice is often a dominance display disguised as helpfulness. Dr. Harriet Lerner explains that when someone consistently positions themselves as the expert on your life, they're establishing a power dynamic where you become the incompetent one who needs guidance. Notice how their suggestions feel slightly condescending, how they always seem to know better than you do, how following their advice makes you more dependent on their judgment. That's not wisdom. That's gradual autonomy erosion. They're not helping you become your best self. They're helping you become their ideal version of you. The sixth green flag that's actually a red flag is exclusive attention. They make you feel like the most important person in their world, prioritizing your needs above everything else, always available when you need them. It feels like you found someone who truly values you. But this isn't devotion, it's isolation strategy. Studies on manipulative relationships show that excessive attention often serves to separate targets from their support networks. When someone becomes your primary source of validation, attention, and emotional support, other relationships naturally begin to fade. Research indicates that this exclusive focus creates psychological dependency while appearing to be special treatment. Notice how their attention feels slightly overwhelming, how other relationships start to seem less important, how you begin to rely on them for emotional needs that used to be met by multiple people. That's not being cherished, that's being isolated. Real love encourages your other connections. Manipulative love replaces them. The seventh green flag that's actually a red flag is emotional availability. They're always ready to listen to your problems, offer comfort during difficult times, and provide emotional support whenever you need it. It feels like you found someone with exceptional emotional intelligence, but they're not being supportive. They're being strategic. Research on trauma bonding shows that manipulators often position themselves as emotional rescuers, creating dependency through selective availability during vulnerable moments. Dr. Robin Stern notes that this creates a psychological association between the manipulator and emotional relief, making it harder to recognize their role in creating emotional distress. Notice how their support feels slightly conditional, how they seem to be most available during your lowest moments, how their comfort comes with subtle expectations or obligations. That's not emotional maturity. That's emotional manipulation. They're not healing your wounds. They're keeping them open. So you'll keep coming back for treatment. The eighth green flag that's actually a red flag is conflict avoidance. They never argue with you, always seek peaceful resolutions, and seem committed to harmony in the relationship. It feels like you found someone mature enough to avoid unnecessary drama. But they're not avoiding conflict. They're avoiding accountability. Studies in relationship psychology show that healthy relationships require constructive conflict to address problems and establish boundaries. When someone consistently avoids disagreement, they're often using passive-aggressive tactics to maintain control while appearing peaceful. Research indicates that this conflict avoidance often masks deeper manipulation strategies. Notice how their peacekeeping feels slightly superficial, how problems never really get resolved, how you start to avoid bringing up issues because they shut down or withdraw. That's not maturity. That's manipulation through emotional withdrawal. They're not creating harmony. They're creating a dynamic where your needs don't matter, as long as their comfort is maintained. The most dangerous green flags are still coming. These next four don't just feel good, they feel like proof of genuine love and commitment. The ninth green flag that's actually a red flag is shared trauma bonding. They open up about their past wounds, creating a sense of mutual understanding and shared healing. It feels like you found someone who truly gets your pain. But they're not sharing to connect, they're sharing to control. Clinical research shows that manipulators often use strategic vulnerability to create artificial intimacy and emotional dependency. Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that trauma bonding occurs when someone alternates between being the source of comfort and the source of distress, creating an addictive cycle of relief and anxiety. Notice how their vulnerability feels perfectly timed, how their pain seems to mirror yours in convenient ways, how sharing trauma creates a sense of obligation to stay and help them heal. That's not mutual support. That's weaponized vulnerability. They're not healing with you. They're using your empathy as an anchor to keep you attached. The 10th green flag that's actually a red flag is future planning. They talk about long-term goals together, make plans months or years in advance, and seem genuinely committed to building a life with you. It feels like you found someone serious about the relationship, but they're not planning a future. They're creating pressure. Behavioral psychology research shows that premature future planning is often used to accelerate commitment and reduce the likelihood of leaving. Studies indicate that when someone invests heavily in future plans, they experience psychological pressure to follow through even when the relationship becomes unhealthy. Notice how their future plans feel slightly rushed, how they assume your participation without really asking, how changing or questioning these plans creates tension or disappointment. That's not commitment, that's entrapment. They're not building a future with you, they're building a cage around you. The 11th green flag that's actually a red flag is defending you to others. They stand up for you in social situations, protect your reputation, and seem genuinely invested in your well-being. It feels like you found a true ally, but they're not defending you. They're isolating you. Research on coercive control shows that manipulators often create artificial conflicts between their target and others, then position themselves as the protector. This creates dependency while appearing supportive. Studies indicate that this defense often involves exaggerating or manufacturing threats to increase the target's reliance on the manipulator's protection. Notice how their defense feels slightly dramatic, how conflicts with others seem to increase after they get involved, how you start to rely on them to handle social situations. That's not loyalty. That's manufactured dependency. They're not protecting you from others. They're protecting their access to you. The 12th and most dangerous green flag that's actually a red flag is consistent check-ins. They text regularly, call to see how you're doing, and seem genuinely interested in your daily life. It feels like you found someone who truly cares about your well-being, but they're not checking in. They're checking up. Studies in surveillance psychology show that excessive monitoring often disguises itself as care and concern. Research indicates that when someone needs constant updates on your activities, location, and emotional state, they're gathering intelligence, not expressing love. This creates a dynamic where privacy becomes impossible while appearing to be attentiveness. Notice how their check-ins feel slightly intrusive, how not responding immediately creates tension, how they seem to know details about your life that you don't remember sharing. That's not caring. That's surveillance. They're not interested in your well-being. They're interested in your whereabouts, your activities, and your emotional state so they can maintain control. These 12 green flags reveal the sophisticated camouflage that modern manipulators use. They've learned that obvious red flags get spotted, so they've weaponized the very behaviors we've been taught to value. Kindness becomes love bombing. Attention becomes surveillance. Protection becomes control. Care becomes manipulation. The most dangerous part isn't that these behaviors exist, it's that they feel so good when you experience them. Your brain's reward system gets hijacked before your rational mind can intervene. You're not just being manipulated, you're being conditioned to crave the manipulation. But awareness changes everything. When you know what to look for, these green flags lose their power. Real kindness doesn't create debt. Genuine attention doesn't feel overwhelming. Authentic protection doesn't limit your freedom. True care doesn't require surveillance. Context matters. One behavior alone doesn't define a person, but patterns do. And when multiple green flags appear together, especially early in a relationship, your instincts are trying to tell you something important. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone, it's to become discerning about anyone. Because the most important red flags are often the ones we were taught to trust. Trust your discomfort, even when someone seems perfect, especially when someone seems perfect, because real people aren't perfect. Only performances are. Which one of these fooled you? Let me know in the comments.